kind of a Siamese.
So in natural signals, there are two concepts. One is repetitiveness and the other is localization. What I mean by that is, let's say if you look at a crowd of people, right? So this is a crowd of faces, and this is an image of a crowd of faces, right? So they are all attending your lecture, right? So here what you can see is that the shape of an eye keeps getting repeated in different parts of the image. Okay, so if you build an eye detector, it is useful in different positions of the image. Okay, and we can go even smaller than an eye. We can look at the edge, the vertical edge of the face. So this vertical edge keeps getting repeated in different parts of the image. In fact, it may also be used for other objects, detecting parts of another object such as a chair. Okay, so this vertical edge may also be a primitive or a small feature that occurs in different parts of the image. Now similarly, we will have horizontal edges and diagonal edges that occur in different parts of the image. The other concept is localization, which means that if you want to look at an object, right, in this object, this eye itself is the detection of the eye doesn't need to look at the entire image but only at a small locality of the eye. Okay. Similarly, if you want to find the mouth, it is in one small locality, right? So the objects are finite in size, right, and they self-repeat in some sense, or these features that we detect are self-repeating. The same is the case with audio, for example. So let's say this is your pressure wave in an audio. So different phonemes that we talk about. So let's say if we use the word bear, so we have b, a, okay, and r, r. So these different phonemes, right, they persist only for a short time duration. So that is the localization aspect, and they are repeated in other words and other sentences. So for example, pair, that the same two phonemes occur in pair also. Okay, so I'm not looking at the spelling, but let's say if you insist on the spelling, then this is the spelling. Okay, I was trying to write it phonetically, but basically you get the idea that the same thing is localized and it repeats. The other aspect of natural signals is that these localized signals, many of them put together, actually give you a hierarchy of objects and parts. So the objects and parts, for example, a face is composed of different parts of the face, for example, eyes and nose and lips, and then the entire human is composed of different parts of which face is a part, and then crowd is composed of several humans, and then if you go to a smaller level, then eye is composed of different oriented edges and so forth. Similarly, in natural language we have documents and paragraphs, and then we have sentences, and then we have words, and then we have phonemes, etc. So there is a hierarchy also. So this repetitiveness, localization, and hierarchy is something that you will see in natural signals all the time. So these are both in audio, in natural language text, in videos, and in images. The other part that you can the other commonality between them is that these signals appear on a grid, either on a two-dimensional grid or on a one-dimensional grid or on a three-dimensional grid. Okay, and the order of samples on the grid, so the pixels in an image or the audio samples on a one-dimensional grid and so forth, that order is important. You cannot switch the order, which is not the case with when you are looking at vector data and you are looking at previously taught machine learning frameworks, where the order of dimensions of the vector, if it is consistently swapped, then it is still meaningful. Here, if you swap the pixel locations, then the image gets jumbled and the shapes are no longer visible. or if you swap the pressure measurements in an audio wave, then the audio gets garbled and it's no longer perceptible. Same with sentences, etc. So the order is also important here. So this has led to, through evolution, a set of neurons that locally detect features on the sensing surfaces that we have. So one of the sensing surfaces that we have is the retina. So if you look at the eye, so this is the lens of the eye, and then the image forms on the retina, and on the retina, so the light enters here and it falls on the retina, and the retina has these nerve cells that go out into the optical nerve, and then it goes into the visual cortex, the part of the brain where the vision is processed. So in visual cortex there are neurons, right, and they are such that they only look at a local portion of the retina. Each neuron looks at only a local portion of the retina, and it detects a very simple feature such as an oriented edge, whether the edge is vertical or horizontal or diagonal and so forth. And there are several such neurons here. So they specialize in detecting only simple features, but the same feature again and again at different locations of the retina, and they look at a small location of a small spatial compact in which they are trying to detect that shape. They are not looking at the entire retina for a feature. They are looking at a small portion, spatial portion of the retina. They have connections to only a small spatial portion of the retina. So this is found also in auditory complex and so forth, in our auditory processing system and so forth. So this idea has been used in something called convolutional layers. Let's try to understand that in one dimension, and then we will extend it to 2 dimensions and then 3 dimensions. So let's say we have inputs, right? We have x1, x2 all the way up to x5, and the order of this input is important. So let's say these are pressure measurements of an audio wave at different time instances when we are sampling the audio wave. So we cannot swap x2 and x3. That will change the perception of the audio wave itself, and it will no longer be the way we understand audio, or similar to how pixel locations cannot be swapped in an image. That order is important. So these cannot be permuted. So now let's say we have some sort of a feature detector where we have some weight W1 here, another weight W2 here, and a weight W3 here. So notice that this is not taking any input from here or here. What that means is that it does not need input more than a small location on that grid. So localization is important, right? And then it is trying to compute that feature. Now because the feature that, let's say the phoneme that we are trying to detect can appear anywhere in time, right? We can shift that entire feature detector, and without changing the weights, that is more important. Without changing these weights, we can shift the entire thing down on this grid to detect the location of the same thing in another location. So we can basically go from here to here to here without changing the weights themselves. So we reuse the weights at different locations. Okay. So but every time we change the location, we get a new output. Every time we change the location, we get a new output. Okay. So we computed 3 different outputs without changing the weights. That is basically what convolution is. So this shifting or sliding by one location, okay, of the same set of weights or the same filter or the same kernel is called convolution. So these set of weights with this neuron is called a kernel or a convolutional filter. So basically what it is doing is it is trying to, when will it give you a good high response? So this W1, W2 and W3 will give you a high response when the input that it is examining also has the same shape as W1, W2, W3. What I mean by shape is same magnitude and sign, similar magnitude and sign as W1, W2, W3, because then we get that square effect and all the negatives becomes positives, two negatives become positives, and so forth. So we get high correlation in some sense. So it's a sort of like a correlation detector, and that correlation has is like a dot product, and that's why it's also called a kernel. So this works when your features are local, okay, and the presence or absence is stationary. If you take many images, the probability of finding a vertical edge at a given location is the same. It's not like only left side of the image will have vertical edges and the right side will not have vertical edges. That can happen in things like X-ray images. When you always take chest X-rays, it is the image statistics in different locations are not stationary, because you always look at the objects in the same location in chest X-rays, but in general images they are quite stationary. Whatever, if you take patches in different parts of the image over many images, their statistics are going to be the same. So when the statistics are the same, we call it that it's a stationary signal. And for stationary signals, this convolution is a very efficient way of detecting certain features. Alright, so without increasing the number of weights, we have been able to calculate, let's say, 3 different outputs. In fact, we can extend this down further and calculate many outputs, almost same as the number of inputs, without increasing more than 3 weights. So that is the whole idea of a convolution layer. So now we can extend this to 2 dimensions. So let's say we have an image, and that image has 2 indices for rows and columns. One is I, the other is j, and let's say the size of the image is 224 by 224. Okay, so I and j range from 1 to 224. Okay, and then now we define a window. This convolution, instead of being 3 weights, it's going to be 9 weights, because let's say we can have a 3 by 3 window. Now we are going to look at it in 2 dimensions. So our weights are going to have also have 2 dimensional indices, u and v, but it is it's a 3 by 3 window, so it has 3 indices, -1, 0 and +1. I will talk about it more in a little bit, but let's say these are the 3 indices. Okay, so if we want to have the sliding effect, okay, so first of all we are taking the correlation between w and x, okay, and that correlation is based on a sum product of wuv and xuv, but we can shift xuv, the index of x, to any location I and j. So xi plus u and xj plus v. Okay, so these are the 2 indices, and we will take that correlation and we will compute that, so, and that will give us for one output location, which is at ij location. Okay, and then we can add a bias, and we can send this pointwise through a sigmoid or a tanh or through a ReLU. Okay, so those things can also be done. So now let's see how that is visualized. So let's say this is any ijth position, this is I and j position, okay, and here we have the pixel xij, but now we have a small window around it, a 3 by 3 window around it, and our kernel, which is sliding over it, which is wuv, is also 3 by 3. So if I take this element and this element, and I will multiply them, then I add it to the product of this element and this element, product of this element and this element. So I will get 9 different products that I add up, and when I add them up and add a bias to it, what I will get is one term, zij. Okay, then I can shift it to the right, I can shift it one portion to the right, and then I will get the next product. Then I will shift it one more to the right, and then I will get the next zij, and so forth. Okay, so I'm sliding it right. When I reach the end, then I will go down by 1 step and again start sliding it to the right. So I go either one right or one down. Okay, so that is the convolution in 2 dimensions, because I have this dimension and this dimension to take care of. Okay, So this is how I will get all the outputs. So you may be wondering what happens at the edge. So we have two options here. One option is that we don't go beyond the edge. The other option is that I pad the edge with one extra value of zeros, so that I can also go beyond the edge, and then I can have the same size output as that of the input. So those are just nitty-gritties of convolutional layers, but basically these layers help us detect different different features that are localized in the image. So for example, one W could be detecting vertical edges, another could be detecting horizontal edges, another could be detecting diagonal edges, and we could be sliding it all over the image. So now, what is also clear is that just a single W is not useful. We need multiple W's. For example, we want to detect edges of multiple different orientations. So this, we will modify the convolutional operation to bring in some new indices. So let's say our input is not just I and J, but input have multiple channels. So for example, an image has 3 different channels: red, green and blue. Okay, so the channel is now described by the third index, which is K. All right, and now the output itself has more than one channel, which is M different channels. Why more channels? So this is the number of feature detectors that we have. So for example, if we want to detect this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this and this, etc. So we need 8 different channels, and perhaps a negative of all that also. So for example, going from dark to light and light to dark and so forth. So we need multiple different channels. So the output will also be multidimensional for each location of the input. So the way this will work is that we have we will have mth channel for the output also, and ith location and jth location, ith row and jth column. Okay, and for that we will run a sum over the size of the filter as well as number of input channels, okay, which is K. And we will have now your weight has 4 dimensions, okay, U, V, or 4 different indices, U, V, K and M, and then the input that we had has 3 indices, just like we had here, I, J and K. But I, we will offset it by U, and J we will offset it by V. Okay, so to visualize this, what we get is something like what is shown here. So these number of channels that you have are K channels. This is I and this is J. All right, here we have U here and we have V here, and the number of channels, because this has to fit exactly onto the input, this is going to be K. But then we have multiple kernels. One detects horizontal edges, the other detects vertical edges, etc. So these multiple kernels, the second kernel, the index for the kernel is going to be M. Okay, so now I have output, I have M different outputs. Okay, and again the indices are I and J. Okay, so I get 2 different feature maps, one for each kernel. Okay, and the size or the depth of the kernel should match the depth of the input, the number of channels of the input. Okay, so this tells you how many trainable parameters in this you have. The number of trainable parameters you have is 3 times 3 times K times M, and then you have one bias for both of these neurons. So we'll have 2 biases also, or M biases also. Okay.